In this video, we will take a look at factoring polynomials of the form x squared plus bx plus c. Okay, so this should be somewhat familiar. You might recall when we distribute polynomials, we will use the distributive property to multiply each term times each term. Here's an example of that. If I was to take the polynomial x plus 1 and multiply it by the polynomial x minus 2, I need to distribute both terms to all of the other terms. So I would start with x. I would multiply x times x, and I would get x squared. Then I would also multiply x by -2. I'd get -2x. Then I would take the second term, 1, and I would also distribute to both. 1 times x would be 1x, and then lastly, 1 times -2 would be -2. The last thing you'll want to do with this kind of distribution property is consolidate like terms. In the middle there, we have like terms. And so a best final answer would be x squared. -2x plus 1 is -1x, or -x minus 2. That would be a simplified answer. That's the distribution. So factoring is the reverse of that. If we were to start on this right-hand side and work our way back to these factors, that process is known as factoring. And so this is going to look familiar to a lot of you. Let's take a look at an example where we're asked to factor a polynomial. What if we were asked to factor x squared plus 5x plus 6? So the technique we'll use in this course is to rewrite it as two binomials, or two polynomials with two terms. And we're going to do that by focusing on the first term and the last term. The first term here is x squared. Now, the only way we can get that term will be x times x. So we'll lead off with that. Then we'll skip the middle term for just a second. We're going to come back and check that. That's going to be our check term. And we're going to go to the last term, which is 6. And we're going to think about what are possible factors of 6. And there's really two good options here. 1 times 6 is 6, but also 2 times 3 is 6. Those both make 6. And so if we don't have a strategy, we might just think, well, okay, let's try 1 and 6. The problem is it won't work out when we check. And so here's how we do the check. When we check, we redistribute. We think about, oh yeah, I'm going to need to do x times 6. That's 6x, and 1 times x, that's 1x. And I know that 6x plus 1x is equal to 7x, but I needed a 5x. So that means that that simply does not work. This is a little bit of guessing and checking. So the second guess, we're going to use the other factors of 6, 2 times 3. We're going to use x plus 2 and x plus 3, and then we're going to check that. And again, the way we would check that is making sure that these terms, x times 3, that's 3x, and 2 times x is 2x, in fact, gives us that middle term of 5x. That's what we want. So this will be our factored form for the original question. Let's take a look at just one more. If we have x squared, all right, plus 4x minus 12, right? We'll start the same way. We'll look at the first term, we'll look at the last term, and then we'll use the middle term as a check. Okay, so starting off, the first term is x squared. That will be x times x. And this time a little more complex. The middle term, again, is the check term. The last term is -12. So if we have a negative, we know that we need to multiply a positive times a negative. So we have several options because 12 is a number with a lot of factors. So we have, we have -1 times 12, and that gives me 12. But don't forget that it would also be possible to do 1 times -12. And then don't forget -2 times 6, or another possibility is 2 times -6. And then there's -3 times 4, or 3 times -4. Now, you can try each one of these 6 possibilities and then check. Remember, use your middle term as a check. But maybe a faster technique is to think of, well, I know these all multiply to -12, but maybe one of these sets will end up adding up to, because we're combining like terms, will end up adding to 4. So we kind of go through them. These first two numbers, if you add them, -1 plus 12, you would get 11. The next one, we give you -11. Then notice the third one, though, something cool happens. -2 plus 6, in fact, gives me 4. The other ones, if you'll add, so this doesn't work, this doesn't work. This one doesn't work because it adds to -4. These two numbers add to +1, and these two numbers add to -1. The only one that works is -2 and 6. And you can always check when you get that in there. If you put x minus 2 and x plus 6, you can make sure that when you distribute, right, when you multiply this out, right, to all 4 terms, that in fact comes back to be your original expression, and it does. So that's a little bit about factoring these types of polynomials.